We are continuing to follow some breaking news here on Live Now from Fox, and you are taking a live look at a square in Uvalde, Texas. This is where in 2022 there was a mass school shooting at Robb Elementary School. 19 students and 2 teachers were killed in that shooting. What happened just moments ago is the U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland spoke in Uvalde, Texas about a newly released Department of Justice report indicating that the response to the shooting was, quote, failures in leadership, tactics, communication, training, and preparedness. Those were made by law enforcement and others who responded to the mass shooting. He also described how 33 students and 3 teachers were trapped inside classrooms with an active shooter for over an hour, while officers remained outside. Garland said that he spoke with the families of the victims yesterday, indicating one of the missions of this report was to honor those killed during this tragedy because, quote, their loved ones deserved better. We also heard here live on Live Now from Fox from some of the family members and attorneys of the victims who indicated that while they are appreciative of this review, they are determined to see change when it comes to gun laws and action being taken to make sure that something like this doesn't happen again. We do want to bring in expert Dr. Robert Sanders, who is the senior lecturer of national security at the University of New Haven, to shed more light on all of this. Dr. Sanders, thank you so much for joining us.
Glad to be with you.
So we do want to ask you, when it came to this report that was just released, and again, it is hundreds of pages long, but it does indicate, as we heard from U.S. Attorney General Garland, that there were massive failures on a number of fronts. What is the significance of the findings of this report?
One of the things that's unfortunate in review of an after action is that we find out more information and we learn more about when we fail than when we succeed. And what we've learned here is that a cascading series of events led to this failure. It wasn't one single thing, but the one thing that sticks out to me above all others was leadership and training. And the leadership that arrived that day had one job, which was to lead. You show up, and in normal police procedures, in this type of incident, the on-scene commander would be a law enforcement officer. If it was an earthquake or a fire, the on-scene commander would be a fireman. So the local folks are the first ones who show up, and they are the people who take charge and give direction. That didn't happen here. What happened was people did not take charge, and they gave faulty and failing direction to people who did not take action. And as a result, we have this mass murder of children. We learned from Columbine that the first thing that has to happen in these type of situations is the first law enforcement officers on the scene with the capacity to engage have to engage. Form a stack, make your entry, and go forward once you have the ability to do that. They didn't do that. They stood around and discussed or failed to discuss how to move forward for an hour while gunshots were happening, while people were calling from inside the school asking for help, identifying where they were, and not responding to those pleas for help.
How does something like that even happen? Because you were mentioning that people inside the school were calling, pleading for help. Why did it take 77 minutes for law enforcement to then enter in? I mean, that is the biggest question, is that if there were active pleas for help, and you had mentioned a catastrophic failure in leadership, I'm sure that there was a chain of command. When it comes to training and responses, are there not safety measures for redundancy? And I mean, I think it just boggles the mind of people who are hearing the findings.
Yeah, so there's procedures. So procedures are the senior officer on scene becomes the on-scene commander. That on-scene commander then steps back from the edge of the action to get an overview of what's going on and to receive reports from people who are in different locations or surrounding the area where the incident is taking place. And from that on-scene commander then gives direction on how to proceed. One of the first things the direction is how to proceed. Where's our best entry point? Who's available to do the entry? What do we lack to do the entry? What do we have to do the entry? Okay, now we put that together and we proceed with entry in the best way possible. That didn't happen. And you're right to be flabbergasted at the fact that no one stood up and did that.
So I feel like this is such a devastating wake-up call, if you will, when it comes to making sure that the training, the leadership, the communication, all of those vital areas, especially when it comes to a situation like this, are discussed. You know, taking away from that, what do you think the most important actions should be after the review has now been released?
Well, you have an after-action report, you have the review, and the review will give you recommendations and conclusions at the end. It's very long, so people haven't got to that yet. But those recommendations and conclusions will have courses of action for various levels of leadership and organizations. Different training. Individuals who should be punished, individuals who should be reduced in rank from their position. Individuals who should be retrained because apparently they didn't get the training that we thought that they had. So all of those things are going to be in the recommendations and conclusions of the report. And then it'll go to the people who are going to be responsible to implement those recommendations and conclusions. Now, an hour ago, I taught a class in national security on professional practices. Part of that class is to Homeland Security, Emergency Management, National Security, and criminal justice students. One of the things that they have to do in that class is to read the active shooter response document that the Naval Criminal Justice System puts out. I make them read that, and we have to discuss it because they live in a world where this is in reality. And, oh, by the way, one of the places where these things happen are institutions of education, colleges and schools, as well as workplaces.
There's also something that came out in the press conference that I thought was disturbingly astounding, is that the police posted false updates to the public on their social media platforms. And I don't know if you had a chance to hear that, but to me, I just no words.
Yeah, so the sadness of that is that someone who posted that thought they were doing the right thing. They thought that not giving full information on the horrible state of affairs was sparing the public from what was really going on. And in fact, all it did was confuse the public and add to the after reports and feelings of you've lied to us and you've betrayed us. Because during this, you didn't tell us the truth. Now the truth comes out. I can never believe what you say again going forward. You know, people make mistakes. We're human, and those things happen. But if you're trained in the proper manner, you don't put out false information in the middle of an active event. You say nothing if you can't say what's going on for security reasons.
I know that this is breaking news, and this review is hundreds of pages long. People are sifting through it as you and I are having this discussion. But from what we were hearing from Attorney General Garland, from what we were hearing from the families, and what we know of this report, what are the biggest takeaways for you?
Well, let's start with the families piece, because the families heard today some things that they had never heard before. And they haven't fully digested this. When they fully digest this, there's going to be a renewed call for them for action. You heard a couple of them say that they don't feel safe in the environment in which they exist right now, in part because of the firearms that are in their environment, and they live in a state that's a heavily firearm ownership level state, and where gun laws are very lax. We have a Second Amendment at a national level that allows for gun ownership, but it allows for gun ownership in a different way. We regulate getting a license to drive a car. We don't have the similar regulations that protect people from firearms in the hands of people who should not have them. We can't get past that as a nation. We can't get past that in a legislature. How many more times do we have to walk down the street before somebody will actually step forward and change that? So now, what do I take away from the report? I take away from the report that we, again, have identified where the problems are. Now, after we identify the problems, we go tell the people who should have the information and the knowledge, will they hear it and act upon it? Because if you have the, oh, it can't happen to us here attitude, because, you know, that's what you hear on the news. Oh, this is a nice neighborhood. This stuff like that never happens here. Well, stuff like that can happen anywhere. All it takes is one person. And for the law enforcement folks to be on their side is that they have to be always vigilant. They have to never make a mistake, but they're humans as well. They will make mistakes. But how do you reduce that? Well, you reduce that in the same way we do in the military. You train. You train in reality. The Army, Navy, Marine Corps, they said you train like you fight. Well, you train like you need to police. You train like you need to address an active shooter. When you come to a building, you should understand that maybe the doors might be locked. So how would you breach the doors if they're locked? The windows might be locked and closed. How would you breach the windows if they're locked and closed? If you have individuals inside identifying themselves as being in danger but momentarily safe, what do you do about that? These things are things that you have to have identified, scripted, trained, and practiced beforehand, so that when the actual situation arrives, you're not making it up as you go. You're going from rote memory of a planned activity.
And what would your recommendation to law enforcement agencies be to, I would imagine, review their plans in place, to practice them as you imagine? Another component I would also feel would be funding, because national security training techniques, that requires personnel, that requires expertise, that requires finances. I would have to imagine that's also part of the conversation.
It has to be. The idea that we, as a nation, have to divert money from a lot of different areas into protecting ourselves from ourselves is our reality today. And whatever amount of money you have to expend, money's finite. Finances are finite. City budgets are county budgets, state budgets. They have limits. Where do you divide the amount of money that goes to protecting children in schools from a shooter or feeding children in schools? Those things all have to be carved out, divided up, and someone has to make a decision about it. They're hard decisions, but they're reality of the decisions that we need to make today. One of the other things you mentioned was that the people who now have to do this at the police level in the leadership, one of the things that came out of this was a failure to specifically identify who the on-scene commander was going to be and how that on-scene commander was supposed to act. Well, go back and look at your procedures. Do your procedures tell you how to solve that problem? If they don't, you have a hole in your procedures that you need to fix.
Dr. Sanders, before we let you go, is there anything else that you would want to share with us with your initial perspective as this review has just been released?
So there's a national security paradigm. And the national security paradigm is that we have to always win, because one failure means they win. But they can fail multiple times until they win. We have to have a practice where we try to meet the measure of the day and the problem at hand, which is how do we reduce the ability for them to win, whoever the them is. Is it a domestic terror threat or is it an international terror threat? They come in different flavors, but at the end of the day, the end state is bad people killing good people and destroying our infrastructure and our property. How do we stop that? What are the mechanisms we have in place, and how are we going to deploy them in a world where those resources are finite?
Absolutely. Some incredibly important and urgent conversations and actions that need to be had. Dr. Robert Sanders with the University of New Haven, thank you so much for your time.
Glad to be with you.